Welcome back, everybody. This is the EdUp Experience podcast where we make education your business. Dr. Joe Salustio back with you again on another amazing episode with another tremendous guest. Our guest list continues to grow amazingly. I've found and discovered recently I say amazing a lot, so I'm going to try and not do that today. I'll find it. That's why I just said tremendous to describe my guest, because she is. But I do want to remind everybody, when this episode airs, we will have announced, as you guys know, if you've been a listener, I'm writing a book with my co-author, Kate Colbert, called Commencement, a new beginning, new era in higher education through the eyes of 100 plus college and university presidents. We'll have revealed the cover, and hopefully pre-orders will be out soon. And I think you'll all want to pick up a copy when it comes out. With that being said, today, we're going to talk to a trailblazer in the higher ed community, somebody at the front end of what's happening, and no pressure to her right now to give us all the answers. But here she comes. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest today, Nicole Engelbert. She's Vice President of Higher Education Development at Oracle. Nicole, what's happening?
Hey, Joe. Well, first, I want to congratulate you on the new book. That's really exciting. And I know it's probably been an epic kind of amount of work to get it across the finish line, but congratulations. And I will, in fact, pre-order that book and make sure it is on my desk, ready to be read when I
You're
have
awesome.
a moment to spare.
Pre-orders are coming soon. We just finished the cover. We're deep into the writing. And you know, the hardest part has been to take the insights of 100 plus college and university presidents, and then also people in the periphery and ed tech CEOs and people like yourself, and distill the ideas down to something that's going to have meaning for the next 5 to 10 years. You know what I mean? Because there's so much happening in higher education.
Yeah.
And, you know, you must know a little bit about what's happening at Oracle with your role in higher education development. Set the stage for us, Nicole. Tell us about your role, what you do at Oracle, and how you enhance what's happening in higher education.
Sure. So, this is a little bit of a hubris kind of on my part, but I'm just going to kind of roll with it. I think I have one of the best jobs in higher education. Nice. I know that's kind of a big, bold statement to kind of put out there, but
oh yeah,
love it.
But I
say it again. Let me time the button a little bit better. Say it again.
I have the best job in higher education.
Oh yeah.
See, that was even better. Keep going.
But I get to kind of like your book. I spend my days and my nights and my weekends with institutions, with college presidents and provosts and VPs of enrollment and directors of financial aid and admissions counselors and academic advisors, kind of talking about kind of their hopes and dreams and fears and concerns, and try to figure out how we can make their lives better, how they can spend more time on teaching and learning and students, and less time on all the noise, the processes that don't make the boat go faster, the interactions that are kind of the time sucks, all the work that is not why we got into higher education in the first place. And so my time is spent just listening, and then distilling that information kind of back into Oracle's product development process. So, I mean, Oracle, we've got a million products, kind of course. I think we have 5,000 SKUs at Oracle, but that's not the story. I mean, our products are about how do we clear the table so that our customers can focus on kind of what matters to them and their customers. And so that's my job. And how great is that?
Wow.
Right?
Yeah, it's awesome. And what's awesome about that is that you can move with how higher ed moves, right? Because the demands and the challenges and making the lives easier of all the stakeholders that you talked about has been shifting. I would say, over the last couple of years, especially during coronavirus. And boy, haven't we beat that horse to death, but
Oh, yeah.
it is so key to how higher ed has moved lately. So talk about some of the trends that you're seeing as you're meeting with these stakeholders and the presidents and the provosts. What are the challenges that need to be solved right now? What are the, just a couple of areas off the top of your head where you say this has been a real challenge for schools lately, and here's how, Oracle can help, or just tell me what the challenge is?
Yeah. So, it was crazy kind of maybe, gosh, it was probably 6 months in to into the pandemic, where I kind of wrote down in my notebook, and frightening, I actually have like paper notebooks on my
What?
desk.
You have a what?
I know, I do. I go through all those journals that you can find in the
Hey kids, it's the internet.
Well,
I know, and I wrote down, I'm like, you need a new word for disruption, because we're past.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, we're past that for higher education. This is not a disruption anymore, because a disruption, as we kind of conceptualize that in higher education, or really for any industry, is there's going to be a period of tremendous change, tremendous anxiety, tremendous kind of rethinking, but there will be a kind of resumption or a return to the mean, return to the normal. It's like almost if you were watching kind of the volume on my voice on your screen, you'd see kind of it go up and down really large, and then go right back to kind of the mean. But that's not what's happening in higher education. We've moved from what's a disruption to an actual, what we call almost a dislocation of the
That's interesting.
So kind of the culturally, what we consider higher education to be, kind of how we position this industry in terms of the service it delivers, the type of expectations we have of it, kind of how we organize it as an industry, will change, and there will not be kind of this return to a normal, or return to kind of a mean. And I think that's what we're seeing kind of today. And in some of your other kind of podcast speakers have certainly spoke to this in quite articulate ways, but this is where we start getting into, what does work look like in higher education? Does it need to be on campus? Maybe yes, maybe no. We're going to have to grapple with what do the employees, how do they organize kind of their space and their days. And
do you think that Nicole, do you think that just going on that theme, because I love it, right? Dislocation, which implies that eventually I don't know what the opposite of dislocation is, but you'll relocate or fix yourself somehow. Do you think that, because I get this sense sometimes that from people that I talk to, is that yes, disruptions happened. Yes, maybe dislocation is taking place. And it's like everybody's waiting around just a little bit for the what's next. Nobody knows for sure. We're in this testing phase, it feels like, for higher ed. Like we're testing out hybrid and testing out work from home, and nobody's really doubled down and tried to answer the questions fully yet. It's just kind of up in the air still, it's not yet defined. Do you get that sense too?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's in some ways, Joe, a good thing. I mean, I spent, the bulk of my career as an industry analyst talking about trends and putting grand pronouncements together. But in these periods of dislocation, those grand pronouncements are kind of totally useless, because we don't know what is going to happen. There's going to be this organic kind of reorganization of the industry. So almost like a big bang has occurred. We've got all of these meteorites kind of going around kind of in space, and they're trying to figure out how to reconstitute themselves into planets, or kind of into solar systems. And so we're not quite sure how the pieces are going to kind of come together. Kind of, will it be some institutions remain as is, kind of the kind of intensive, highly selective, research intensive institutions they may stay relatively kind of unchanged.
Right.
But now will we start to see institutions really double down on, you know what, we are not going to try any longer to be an R1 institution. We are going to really focus on professional education, and we're going to do that entirely online. Or you're going to see liberal arts colleges saying, you know what, we are going to focus on a smaller select kind of group of academic programs, still with a intensive residential experience. I mean, so we may in fact see this kind of almost breaking down of the industry into many more sub industries. So it'll be a very different looking industry 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road.
I love it. I love the speculation, right? Because it's funny because you look back in time and people who would speculate about higher ed and you just like, yeah, whatever. I mean, like higher ed's fine. But that's the fun part is the speculation now and the prognostication a little bit, because there's so many schools are doing different things. And it's good to look at the innovators and say that could be the future. And, you talked about your journey a little bit, but give me the origin story, Nicole. How do you end up in higher education and advance so quickly into your role and end up at Oracle? Give me the 2-minute origin superhero story.
Oh my goodness. Well, no, I don't know. Am I a superhero or super?
Oh, come on.
You
are a superhero.
There's no garage kind of involved, kind of a step over the way. In many regards, I am exactly what the proponents of liberal arts education kind of hope and dream for happening. I have a degree, an undergraduate degree in classics. So I Greek and Latin languages, Euripidean drama, that was my thing. And I really thought I would end up teaching Latin and Greek.
Written.
Yes, written. I was a classicist, so not modern Greek. Certainly no such thing as modern Latin at this point. But kind of after that was not really a career path. So I took a job as an admissions counselor and absolutely fell in love with the impact. Oh, that's so sweet. But yeah, it was that chance to put a young person or a middle-aged person or kind of an older person or someone doing a job or career change to help them find the right path forward. But I quickly learned that I needed to know more, that just kind of being in the admissions office, I needed to do kind of research and time. And so I went to graduate school and got my policy degree and got caught up in kind of the .com era related to that transition from analog to digital for the provision of education services, and eventually found my way to being an industry analyst. So advising institutions on what their strategy should be to, if you want to focus more time on teaching and learning and research, how do you organize your IT operation to best support that? And gosh, I did that for 12 years, institutions kind of all over the world, big and small, and everything from, voice over IP. No offense to the voice over IP folks, not the most exciting. But what was really exciting was student systems. And I absolutely fell in love and saw the power and the potential to kind of change the experience for students with that product. And this is where the kind of crazy background music in my superhero movie would kind of come to play. I said, I must now kind of get off the bench and kind of go get in the game and actually kind of build. And so I went to Oracle, and they very graciously offered me a position to really kind of build out and kind of create our longer term strategy for what a student system can be and what it can do for institutions and their students.
Nicole, you may be familiar that from time to time, since you talked about the music that your superhero self would come out to, I'm going to ask you now our special curveball question. You ready?
Oh gosh. Okay. I'm ready, I think.
Here it comes. I have this because I just like to hit. It makes me feel like a game show announcer. For no money, Nicole. I just have to clarify with the music because it feels like I'm giving away a prize. There's no prize, but we are going to ask you, what is that superhero music? What's your entrance music? What's the music that would play when you come on stage, when you come into a room, a staff meeting, if you had to be introduced by a song?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. That is a wild song. I would
Careful,
think,
because if you give a really good answer, then it's possible your staff plays this next time. And if you give a really bad answer, then it's going to follow you forever.
I think that it would be the song Freedom. Yes, the song
George
Freedom.
Michael.
Yes, by
Yes.
George Michael. And I've even used it in some internal meetings at Oracle, because that's what it's, for me, that's what it's all about. For my customers and for the industry, is like, how can I kind of help institutions feel more empowered, feel more free to focus on the good stuff, to focus on the real stuff.
That's fire. I love it.
Fire.
That's a great answer. And you know, it tells me a lot about you and what your goals are. And the interesting part, and you know this about higher education right now, as really at any time, is that it's at times it's been slow to innovate, and then at times there have been real trailblazing innovators. How do you see that now as you're intersecting? And we go back to your original point with the provost, with the presidents, with the student services folks, because as you know, higher education has always had kind of a bad rap of not moving quickly, and at a technology company like Oracle, prides itself on moving quickly. That's the entire point of technology.
That's
How do you see that, and how has that experience been lately for you? Is higher ed moving faster and wanting to move faster, or are we still dealing with some of the internal bureaucracy and barriers?
So unequivocally, I'm going to say yes. Higher education is moving and understanding and building capabilities so that they can continue to move at a pace. So it's no longer really kind of episodic kind of change, but they're going to have real capacity for speed and more importantly, probably agility. So to kind of move with speed and precision kind of at the same time. I think it started kind of, Joe, when, what was it, those 10 days, the very beginning of the pandemic, 100 institutions went online. It was so fast. Like the institutions went from students on campus to completely kind of online. And I think it surprised higher education.
Yeah, they moved to thousands of classes and sections online in a matter of a couple of weeks. Exactly.
Wild. I've never seen anything like that. It was like Dunkirk. It was
Amazing.
And yikes and amazing at the same time, depending on how you or who was doing it, right?
Absolutely. And so I think it was a real eye opener to institutions that, you know what, we do have the ability to move quickly. I mean, if we have the will. So, hey, let's flex these muscles a bit more. Let's see what else, kind of what we can do in this area. And what I am seeing kind of with nearly all of our customers and prospective customers that I engage with is that they're really now looking for, how do we build capacity for that kind of long term? So some of that is, we need to build better kind of analytic tools, better reporting tools. I don't like using the word reporting because that's very kind of historical looking.
Feels like reactive reporting.
Yeah,
versus,
exactly.
right?
Exactly. But kind of having the kind of performance management kind of tools at their fingertips and kind of in their kind of daily practice, so they can recognize, hey, you know what, I'm seeing an enrollment trend that is, good or bad or just fine, or I'm seeing some aspect of financial aid packaging that needs addressing, or I can see that kind of 3 years out based on what happened with our first year student population in academic year 21-22, that we're going to need to make some adjustments for residential life. And I see these conversations now happening in a way totally did not see 3 years ago, 5 years ago. And that's really exciting. I mean, that means institutions now are building their capacity for transforming their institutions to be much more high performance. And that's going to really help higher education kind of long term. I mean, I can give you kind of an example that I just love.
Go ahead.
Rutgers University, kind of here in my neck of the woods. I'm a New Yorker, but everyone.
Where are you from in New York? Just to let's hear it.
So I am in Westchester County, and crazy in Eastchester, which is in Westchester County, because of course that makes complete sense.
So I'm originally from Syracuse, New York, which most New Yorkers don't consider anything beyond maybe the lower part of the state, New York. It's considered Canada.
You're definitely
Syracuse, Canada, or Syracuse, New York, depending on who you talk to.
No, you're definitely upstate, and I'm definitely downstate. But Rutgers they went kind of during the pandemic, they went from an annual close of their business to a monthly financial close. And so they were able to really understand with far more kind of granularity, far more precision, far kind of faster time horizons, kind of where they were kind of during the pandemic. And that's huge, because things were changing kind of so rapidly. And if they weren't able to kind of know where they were financially, they couldn't make good or the best decisions for students, for the faculty, for the institution. And Rutgers now is arguably, in many regards, in a better place than it was kind of before the pandemic, kind of simply by getting their kind of heads and hands around kind of better tools to manage the performance of their institution.
Yeah, I think the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. Hey, everybody, head over to www.edupexperience.com, our website, where you're going to find all of the episodes that we've recorded, categorized, so that you can ensure that you're spending your time listening to the podcasts that are most important to you. You're going to see the reviews of our podcasts, the shows in our network, our partners, and a section on starter episodes. If you're new to the EdUp Experience, listen to those starter episodes and get a feel for how the podcast has evolved over time and our impact in the world. www.edupexperience.com. That's a really good example, and one of the ways, as we look at any catalyst, there's an opportunity, and coronavirus is a catalyst as much as it was anything else. It allowed leaders to say, this is my opportunity to use something like this. Let's take the very negative, horrible consequences that it created on the health side and, mental side for everybody. But from a business standpoint, you could look at this and say, okay, there's opportunity in this disruption for us to make these changes and make them in favor of students, and eliminate some of the bureaucracies that existed and people who hold on to responsibilities and the silos and all those things. And you saw so many examples of that. One of the things that I find so interesting about you and so important to what you do now is your start in admissions, because the student is and should be always at the center of decision making we make when we go through in higher education. Maybe not always the case, but should be. How does that background in enrollment, in admissions, in student, in consumer, I mean, assuming you may or may not think a student is a consumer, depending on who you talk to, but does that inform the way you approach things from the technology side?
Oh, absolutely. Every day, it does, because what I think, or what a product manager thinks an experience should be with technology actually doesn't matter. And there's 10,000 product managers around the world right now who are getting out the pitchforks and the torches kind of for me right now as I say that. But it's about the student. What does he or she need in order to get perhaps just a little bit closer to their academic and professional and personal goals? And how can the student system or the CRM solution or the ERP, any constellation of three-letter acronymed products, how can that
We
help?
have plenty of those in higher ed, by the way.
We got plenty of those, brothers. And what we've done kind of during the last year is we launched a student advisory group. So I have a group of about 10 students, and we meet with them every quarter, and we bring our designs for new functionality. We bring functionality that is kind of nearly baked in the oven, and we demo that, and we let the students really tear it apart and say, yes, this is great. No, this is not what we need kind of at all. And even go so far as this is, how do you spend, Shane or Max, so how do you spend kind of your day? What are the things that make you concerned or give you kind of pause? And we start building that kind of into the product. It's wild. And
Amazing.
it absolutely, it is. And it's so inspiring. But you have to be prepared for what you thought was reality for a student may not kind of be.
I'd imagine too that the feedback is absolutely honestly like absolutely honest, and if you take it personally, so hard to take, right? Because it's probably just so organic, like, oh, this doesn't work, right? This isn't working for me. And it's like there may not be the what we would take in the professional world of light feedback where you're gonna, I'm sure the students are absolutely slay it, but give you complete honesty on the product.
They do. And I'm going to kind of quote or reference the president of my own kind of alma mater, Union College, Dr. David Harris. He says over and over again that we have to be kind of more comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think that's so critical for how you develop products. You're going to have to go outside your kind of comfort zone, go outside what you think you believe the truth to be. And students are one of the fastest, best ways to kind of get you in that zone. And so I'll have to say, I think for myself, I can speak for myself and kind of the entire development team at Oracle. It's one of our favorite things during the quarter is the session with our student advisory group.
That's so cool. And I think that gives you a level of credibility too, at the level you are, to be able to say, I've done this job. I've been in admissions. And so for people who are going to be using this system to deal with students, like, I understand some of the struggles that they have. That makes it real, especially when you're dealing with technology companies. You always wonder, and at least part of my vetting that I've always done is I want to know who within that company has done and been within education, that has done the hard work to know the struggle. Right? Because dealing with students every single day is not easy. You have to have a passion for it. You have to have a passion for changing lives and changing futures and going home at the end of the day, and it's work you feel really good about. But it has to become easier because it can be very hard. So how do you make the lives easier of the people who are dealing with the students? I love that you came from, I love anybody who comes from enrollment, be honest, because I did too. And I feel like it gives you just a unique perspective. If you don't know what is going on with the student, it's really hard to design anything, right? You have to have that ground level experience, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And I can tell you, I'm sure you won't mind, but my colleague who kind of heads product development we have a financial aid module as part of our student cloud product, and it's called Student Financial Planning. And John Rafila, like, he was a first generation student at UC Berkeley, and every year he was a student at UC Berkeley, he was selected for financial aid verification, like the most unlucky student kind of in the world in that regard. Though, kind of the students who have the most need are most often selected for verification, and the research on that is, it will make anyone feel terrible. It's just absolutely wrong. But that experience that he had kind of every year thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to be the year that I don't get financial aid and I need to kind of drop out of UC Berkeley, my dream school. That experience drove and inspired him to go on a journey,
Wow.
build a financial aid product that kind of automates 90% of kind of financial aid transactions for institutions and students, and really changes the experience so that kind of students have to do less through the financial aid process. Students feel more empowered during the financial aid process. Students can kind of get back to the real work, because it sure isn't filling out FAFSA forms and responding to verification requests. It's getting back into organic chemistry or getting back into, a European history class. And you can see the results. I mean, this product, Florida A&M, wonderful historically Black college in Florida, which many of us kind of are all super familiar with, but they have implemented the product and it increased the financial aid completion rate for their students by 37%.
That's amazing. Yeah.
So it's getting it done. But it's Joe, it's exactly what you said. It's about having people who are personally inspired and grounded in kind of the real work of the institution, the real mission.
I have to say, I love this too, because the other part that you're kind of tickling on the surface stuff, but I'll come out and say it too, and you would know this, Nicole, and I hate to admit it, but what happens in those scenarios too, especially if you're somebody who's got budgets and you're working towards, a start goal for your institution, and you have students that get selected for verification, it could be a real downer on your admissions folks, because there's more work they have to do, or your financial aid folks, to follow up with the student and chase them down and try to get them to submit something. It's exponentially harder for the student. But what can happen is you end up with this admissions bias where you have admissions folks who go, oh, they're selected for verification. I don't know if it's going to work out. Am I going to really put the work in to chase them down? They've already been hard to get in the first place. I mean, now I've got to do more work. Should I just move my efforts to somebody else? And that's an unintended consequence that happens on the institutional side. And when you can make it easier on the student, then you get everybody excited again about students, instead of something that is out of everyone's control, verification being a downer, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's part of the regular blocking and tackling of the financial aid system, but it can have these emotional moments that get tied to something like that when it's not the student's fault, but it affects how an institution might move forward with a student. It's really a phenomenon, and I've seen it with responding to leads or responding to paperwork, and the harder it is for the student to get it, sometimes the less work the person on the other side wants to put in. It's really interesting.
No, I'm going to throw out a fact here that just, it gives me pause every time. So Alberto Guzman, kind of at University of Pittsburgh, he found that verification costs higher education $500 million kind of a year, in terms of the people and the process and the support that needs to happen in order to comply with the regulations. Now, I'm not going to argue with regulation and compliance. There's a purpose and there's a requirement, absolutely, kind of for it. But to your point, Joe, is that all those financial aid counselors, all those admissions officers, instead of focusing their time on inspiring students for an amazing journey they're going to take, or helping them find kind of the right program of study, or educating them about kind of the right financial choices to kind of fund this educational experience, they are heads down looking at kind of really uninteresting or really not important kind of transactions. They're like doing forensic accounting as opposed to kind of student development work. And I don't think you could show me an admissions counselor or a financial aid counselor who got in this business in the first place because that's what they wanted to do. And so we need to figure out a way to let these folks get back to the real work, to inspire students, to empower students to kind of get on that journey. And so I hope every day I kind of recommit myself that that's what I need to be working on at Oracle.
I love it. Well, Nicole, you've said a lot, and we like to give our guests the same 2 final questions on every episode.
Oh no!
Oh no, they're you're going to answer them. They're going to be easy. The first one is, what did we miss? And we talked about Oracle. We talked about some of the products. We talked about you. Is there something that you wanted to talk about today? A product, event, something you're speaking at, some awesome fact that you want to give? Anything that we may have missed, of course, plug away. Take a couple of minutes and just talk about Oracle or anything that you wanted to bring up. And then second to that, what do you see as the future of higher education?
Well, Joe, these are both really small questions.
Yeah, I know.
Really
But
super.
we only have 10 seconds per question, so give us the answers.
And I can tell you're from admissions asking those types of questions. So the first, I will give a shameless plug to actually an event we are doing on January 19th. It's our higher ed virtual summit. It is available for on demand as well. So if you can't make it on the 19th, that is fine. But we have an amazing lineup of speakers, including Clara Jelenkova from Harvard, Vicky Tambolini from the Tambolini Group, Dr. Sue Henderson from TCNG and J, and actual real live students talking about financial aid. So I encourage everyone to kind of go to the Oracle events page, and you can sign up to watch it live or to kind of watch it at your convenience with a glass of Chardonnay on demand.
Ooh, that sounds good. Awesome. Everybody head to Oracle events, check it out. All right. Yeah. Love it. And Nicole, of course, I would encourage, I'll plug you too. I would encourage everybody who's listening to connect with you on LinkedIn. Yes. You're easy to find. You've got, you're following and pushing out content, and Oracle's pushing out content, and I would encourage everybody to connect with you on LinkedIn as well. So there's a plug for me, for you. How about that?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Now, the future of higher education, that's a much bigger question than our event later this month. But I think one of the big things we're all going to have to grapple with, and it's super exciting kind of stuff, is the introduction of artificial intelligence into one of our systems and into our processes. And I think we are kind of, as an industry, perhaps missing or not considering the impact as much kind of as we should. So I'm going to put it kind of a different way. The machine will become a persona in our processes. So we've got Ethel and Marge and Max working in financial aid. Now we're going to have kind of our artificial intelligence machine kind of working there as well. And so kind of, instead of thinking of it as just doing kind of more faster, because we have this wonderful, powerful machine, we need to also be thinking about how should the process change as well. If we have now a persona who works 24/7, who is kind of all-knowing, who can be perfectly consistent, how would we redesign kind of that financial aid office or the admissions office or academic advisement if we have this kind of really powerful persona now working with us? It's going to be hard. And I think as an industry, we're going to have to really kind of come together and think about what best practice will look like. But I think it's just an incredible kind of opportunity that we can now harness. So I guess I challenge everyone out there to really be thinking about, what would you ask your machine as persona to do in your...
That's I want to just lightly interrupt you and say, what a great idea for an article. If you want to write something, we'll totally help you push it out and get it published, because I find in higher ed and the people I talk to, and you probably have a greater understanding than the rest of us, but when someone says AI and VR, what somebody imagines in their head of what that means is so over like a spectrum. It's so different if you ask anybody what AI means. Like, oh yeah, you're gonna get AI in your school. What does that actually mean to us in higher education? Are we talking about like a robot that's gonna be walking around the campus? Are we talking about, somebody with virtual reality goggles standing on a balcony somewhere accessing a world library? Like, what does that really mean when you distill down those terms to how higher education can implement them? And because it's almost like baby steps somehow, but we don't even understand. And I'm speaking for some of my colleagues, not everyone. What does that mean when somebody
No,
says AI?
absolutely. And if you don't know what they mean, or if even more dangerous, if you don't have consensus kind of across your department or your institution about what you hope the outcome to be, then the product determines that for you.
Yeah, I think
And
I
that's
think the product might be further ahead than the understanding at this point. And I know that the products for AI and VR and so on are going to be evolving very quickly. But how we imagine of taking something so large and implementing it in smaller ways. I mean, because some people think super big when you say a term like that, and they're like, oh, it's going to be, how do you take something and really implement it into your systems, to students, to enhance your operations? And that's the part that I think is the missing connection for us in higher ed. And I'm speaking for myself in this case, but I know so many have the same questions.
absolutely.
So there's your next article, Nicole.
Oh, well, I'll get right on that after I
Not that
read
you
your
don't have
book,
enough to do, of course. Let me just slap more on your plate. Well, it's been an absolute honor to have you on EdUp Experience today. I hope you had a good time, at least, Nicole.
Oh, of course, Joe. Anytime. Good stuff.
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. She is at the front end of what's happening in higher education, and I encourage you to connect with her on LinkedIn. Her name, ladies and gentlemen, my guest today, Nicole Engelbert, Vice President, Higher Education Development at Oracle. Thank you so much, Nicole.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd.